We cover the outcome of the recent Queensland State Election and what it means for shooters there. We also look at the SSAA Shot Expo in Melbourne and Western Australian style changes that Tasmania Police are proposing that will make getting or renewing a licence there more difficult. And welcome to another episode of Gun News Australia, brought to you by Politics Reloaded and also from Gun Traders Australia. Sean Fraser's with me. So how you doing, Sean?
Good morning, Neil. It's only 6 a.m. Here in Queensland. You're a bit in front of us with
We've done that
daylight saving.
Crazy annual thing, and it's a real pain actually because most of the people I deal with through the podcast actually are north of me or south, and yes, it's always a problem, especially given the fact that you're technically behind Adelaide because they've moved, like Victoria and New South Wales, they've moved their clocks forward an hour. You haven't, so Adelaide's actually ahead of you.
Okay. Yeah, everyone's always behind Adelaide. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So we're talking about the Queensland election. We'll be talking about the SSAA Shot Expo and some news out of Tasmania. Now, before we start on Queensland, we've had a few elections this year. We've had the Tasmanian State Election. We've had the state and territory elections. We've had Tasmania. We've had Northern Territory. We've had the ACT, and now Queensland. And so it's been a pretty busy year election-wise. We've got next March, of course, we've got WA and potentially a federal election as well. It's sort of a cycle which obviously keeps churning over as you look around the nation. Now, I just want to emphasise that elections and the coverage of elections is important for shooters. These affect the gun laws we have and the policies that really drive government behind it. And it absolutely matters to the shooting sports, which is something that shooters need to understand. And I'll just say that if you're not interested in politics, not interested in elections, then you don't understand why your guns are being taken off you, or why you're finding it harder to go hunting, or why your neighbours think what you do should be banned. I think government plays a very central role to our future, so that's basically why we're so interested in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's turn to, in fact, the other thing about these elections is that for many of them, we've been dealing with Labor governments in those jurisdictions that were there for COVID, and some of those jurisdictions and others that are yet to have elections closed our gun shops during COVID. So Labor's been, in my view, at least on the nose for that, and also other reasons. And we've seen the classic example in WA about sort of what a bad Labor government can do. But that's not to suggest that the Liberals would be necessarily any better. And for that reason, we're not playing partisan politics here. What we're doing, we're playing the ball, not the man.
Except for the Greens, Neil, we are partisanly 100% against the Greens.
Yeah, they're in those places that have to suffer the Animal Justice Party as well.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no guarantees in politics, but you really have to fight your own battles. So with the Queensland State Election, in the lead up to that, we had the Community Safety Bill introduced by Labor government.
Yep.
Which presented a few thorny things, including dredging up old offences to be able to knock your firearms licence off.
Now, I believe Shooters Union and a few other organisations up in Queensland have had some good news on that, saying that they're not going to drag up 10-year-old offences, or even there were even, what isn't even going to be offences? It was even going to be stuff that wasn't appearing on your record.
Well, it was offences, and yes, it was the Shooters Union that fought that.
Yeah.
And won, which was a good outcome. And there's a very similar vibe, which I'll be touching on later on, for Tasmania.
Yeah. So that was at least some good news on that front. Liberal Party, the LNP, as it's called up in Queensland, had some good policies where it says like adult time for because of the vast juvenile crime up here. Not a lot to do with gun laws, but it shows that the Liberal Party might have, might be more stringent on on crime against firearms, and like theft, firearm theft, and actually give people who steal, steal firearms from, say, farmers, actually real time instead of a slap on the wrist.
Punish the criminal, not the victim, I think.
Correct.
Is probably the thing. So so the election was run and won in October,
Yep.
and I've got the results from the election. Although I think you were just saying before we started that that there may be an update to this. So the results from the ABC side at least have now basically to win the election, the Liberal Labor parties have to get 47 seats, and the information we had as of actually yesterday was the LNP was sitting at 48, so that suggests they could basically manage, which will take government in their own right. Now you've got an update to that, Sean.
Yeah, so the count is currently sitting on 83.4%. LNP have declared, or the Queensland election bodies declared 51 seats currently for the LNP and 34 for ALP. The good news is Greens have lost one, so they lost South. They're losing South Brisbane. They haven't declared that yet, but they are. It's nearly 5,000 votes behind, so they're not going to make that up in preferences. So Amy McMahon, who was really the anti-everything person, anti-Jewish, anti-guns, everything that we believe in, anti-four-wheel drives type woman, has been voted out, which is good. Sad news is, which is pro-gun, KAP have gone from 4 seats to 3. So they've lost, KAP lost Marani, which went to Liberals, but only by about 0.5%. So there was a strong race in Marani for that currently held KAP seat, but that fell to Liberals. So the KAP went from 4 to 3. And then one independent, which was down in Gold Coast, which has remained. So obviously LNP going to form government because they're on 51 at the moment. The good news out of the whole election is the Greens lost one. There was actually a 7% swing against the Greens statewide. So that's excellent.
Yes, interesting because normally when Greens lose votes, they'll go to Labor, and
Yes.
Labor actually went backwards. So that meant that the Greens were really on the nose.
Yeah, well, to give you to add to that, Neil, like there was a swing, there was a 5.9% swing across the state to Liberal to LNP. I think hence they picked up about 12 seats. However, in South Brisbane, which was the Greens' Amy McMahon seat, there was a 12.0% swing to the ALP, and that's a huge swing. And that's going against it. So you've got a statewide swing of 5.9% to LNP, and yet they go backwards, and there's a 12% swing against the Greens to the ALP. That's enormous.
And you've got thoughts as to why as well.
Yeah, well, obviously she's just besides being on the nose. I mean, I think a lot of there's 2 types. I think there's 2 types of Green supporters. There's the out and out activist type Greens who will always be Green supporters. They are the like the anti-everything type people. They are rock solid Greens and always will. There's nothing you can say. You can't talk to them. You can't reason with them. You can't talk to them especially about shooting, because they think you're an absolute devil's incarnate if you're a shooter. However, the Greens, as you know, in Victoria, New South Wales, and Clean Queensland, have become very pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel over the last 12 months. Now, the Victorian-based AGA, which is the Australian Jewish Association, pumped a lot of money into campaigning against Amy in the South Brisbane seat. So, like financing how to vote and financing the basically to get rid of the sitting Greens member. So I don't know. I can't tell you, Neil, how much that had an effect on the 12% swing. But when someone's pumping a lot of money into specifically trying to get rid of you, that's got to have some effect.
Yeah, and I saw online some of the billboards that they put up in the electorate.
Yes.
They were just fairly squarely taking aim at not only the Greens, but making it clear that their policies exclude you, and you
Yes.
being sort of some of the particularly the ethnic groups
Yes.
affected
Yes. So
by the policy. So they've gone a long way. The Greens have gone a long way from hugging trees and koalas to going after people
yeah.
in their own electorate.
I mean,
It's obscene.
look, Bob Brown, who's what, he must be pushing 80 years old now, the original founder of the Greens in Tasmania for save the which river was it?
Gordon above
Yeah,
Franklin Dam or
the
something like
Franklin
that.
Dam. Yeah, they saved the Franklin Dam. It was that was the foundation of the Greens 30 years ago. That party no longer exists. You've got a basically it's nothing but a hate party. It's literally it's now a activist extreme hate party,
I think
and
it's a
that's
good
what I
one.
meant. Yeah, that's what I meant about there's two types of Green supporters. The roughly, oh yeah, I'll vote Greens for the environment. They have left the party. They have gone, no, this is not an environmental party. They have now left the party, and they no longer voted. They've lost that vote, and that's why there's a 7% swing against the Greens.
I wish the formation of the Greens was only 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You're making me feel a little bit older now because it's actually about 40 years ago.
40 years ago, okay.
It was the early 1980s. So,
yes. Well, I'm 54. How old are you now?
I had this big 6 a little while ago. Okay, so look, not a perfect outcome for shooters in Queensland.
No.
The best outcome would have been a balance of power held by Katter.
Yes, because the Katter party is extremely pro-gun. Obviously, they've got affiliations with Nyla up here because of obviously their family connection there within the Katter party. But the whole Katter party's policies, plus every member of the Katter party is a shooter. So they are extremely pro-gun. It's a pity they lost one seat, but they only lost it to a very close run with the LNP member, who I believe is also a shooter in that seat of Barani. So we shall see.
That might have been the seat. I think it was held by One Nation. They had a seat there.
Yes. Now,
the guy.
Yeah, he went to that member. He defected from One Nation and went to it. He ran under Katter.
Hmm.
So
it was a lost seat because it was held by One Nation, but it was held at least by somebody who we would have had on it.
Yes, I'm not sure how technically you classify that. I mean, it's not really a lost seat. He did defect to the Katter party from One Nation.
All right, so we're going to come back to I guess some election stuff a little bit later, but I want to talk now about the SSAA Shot Expo that was recently held in Melbourne. And the reason why I want to talk about that is the first one in 5 years, and I've actually got the program there. Obviously, if you're on the audio podcast, you're not going to see anything, but it was actually I went to the expo on the morning of the first day, which I actually vowed I'd probably never do because that's when the crowds usually start to come in. And look, I think in some way it was a good event. It was, as I said, the first one in 5 years. It wasn't as big, I think, as previous years, but that's hardly a surprise because we had COVID in between. It takes a while to build this, the momentum back up. It was in a smaller pavilion than last time, but it was still a big event. The traffic getting to the showgrounds in Melbourne it's been bad at the worst of times, but it was bad this time. It was kilometres long traffic queues just to get into the ground.
Yeah, I heard some people actually spent longer in the traffic queue than they did at the show.
It was insane, and in fact, when you get to the grounds, there was a queue outside to get in the pavilion. The previous shows, the queues, you'd actually be processed inside the hall. This one, because it's a smaller venue, there was a long queue that snaked around, and it was probably, I reckon, 400 plus meters long. When I was there on the morning, when I left, it was much shorter. But the queue kept moving, and so it wasn't that bad. Actually, to get in. This is obviously if you've got your tickets. They had a booth outside. If you didn't have them, you could to purchase them. But once inside, I mean, there was 120, 130 stalls that were inside, and there was also some stalls outside, which include a couple of mobile shooting ranges. One by it was a pistol range from Victorian Amateur Pistol Association, and the other was a rifle range from Target Rifle Victoria, and space for gun dog demonstrations, and there's other stuff. So there was 130 to 140 exhibitors all up.
Yep, that's good. I mean, from what the exhibitors I saw, I mean, they were putting on a good event, and yeah, the crowds I saw were quite intense from the footage. But as you say, that might have been on a Saturday morning. I'm not sure about the crowds on Sunday.
Yeah, I really wanted to avoid the early Saturday afternoon because you haven't been to a gun show before. I can tell you now that those events, you can't move sometimes. You get stuck in those aisles, and people are stopping, looking at stuff, the toys really, and they're people looking over other people's shoulders and other people looking over their shoulders. So they bank up, and it doesn't leave much space in between to walk down the aisles.
Yeah,
it's fun.
I definitely think look, SSAA Victoria and all their head their executive really did a good job getting it back into Victoria, getting the SHOT Show back on the line again. I mean, that was a 5-year hiatus. It was a bit of COVID, and there was a few other issues as well. I think there's some issues with the last organizer of the show, the previous organizer, did a runner with some money. So there was some issue. It wasn't just COVID. It was some serious issues of getting the show back up again.
There was some doubt as to whether it would happen.
Yes.
But it did happen. So well done to SSAA.
Yeah.
And look, I think pretty much the who's who of shooting was there. The Tom Kenyon, the national CEO of SSAA, I bumped into, and he had a bit of a chat. Jack Wegman, CEO of SSAA Victoria, was there. And I think on the Sunday, I wasn't there on the Sunday, but I think Bridget McKenzie and the usual faces that we used to seeing were around. So it was good that they're there, and they're still sort of. And I think just a commentary on SSAA National is what I'm really encouraged. I made a comment about this before. I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing from them in terms of their political approach, and also. If there was anybody who was in the box seat to be able to help drive change to our political problems, I would say it would be Tom, partly because he's head of the biggest organisation, but he's also got the right approach, and that's encouraging.
Good. Yeah, it's good to hear. The one change from the last SHOT Show, Neil, that I did notice is like in the last previous 5 years, you've got the rise of I'd say the celebrity Australian YouTubers, where like Hunt the Night and people who basically run shooting podcasts in Australia were in attendance, and that obviously 5 years ago existed, but it existed on a very small niche portion. Now you've actually seen people well known in the industry who actually produce content for YouTube, whether it be hunting or target related or whatever. And that's good. That's a change that I've noticed as well, Neil.
Yep. And I also, I don't want to labour on it, but if you look at SSAA National's influence on Western Australia, we've also seen the SSAA, who I've been very critical of in the past, actually do some pretty good things of late, which, as I said, it comes out of the national office. There's no doubt about that. And there's there's a range of more forums being hosted by the nationals with the SSAA there that are being held now in country WA, or even probably even the suburban areas. And that's, look, the WA state election is going to be a very difficult one for shooters, but you've got to start and progress sometime. And I think, look, again, it's heading in the right direction. That's what I'm pleased to see. Now, I will skip Sean. I was going to make commentary about a couple of people who I did run into who do not impress me at all in the industry. I will leave that for another day, though. I think
Right.
it's the SSAA's day, and I think let's just take a glass half full approach to this. So I'm going to bite my lip on some of
Yeah.
those things. Now, so you look, well done, SSAA, and also there was another, actually an arms fair in Maryborough, up your way, which I saw a video of recently by Gun Traders Australia, and I think it's got me thinking too that we've had SSAA Shot Show, we've had the Maryborough Arms Fair, and there's other ones that happen during the year, and I would seriously encourage any shooter who has never been to a gun show, go to Google, whatever search engine you want to use, look up gun show near me, put it in your diary and go, because these are really good events. They're really a chance to see what happens elsewhere in the shooting industry. You might find stuff that you're directly interested in, but I think it's more important to have a look around and see some of the wonderful stuff that's there, and things that people do, which shows just how broad the shooting interests around Australia are.
Yeah.
And of course, on that theme, we've got the Brisbane Firearms Expo coming up next year on the 24th, I think, and the 25th, 24th and 25th of May, which is being run by the Shooters Union. So certainly shooters up in Brisbane, Queenslanders really should be making their way to that. And the website for that is, I think it's firearmsexpo.com.au, or just look up Brisbane Firearms Expo and you'll find it.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot on that so far. I think they're still in the process of organising sponsors, getting attendees, but it's early days and it's the first one that Shooters Unions run, so hopefully that does well.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see any detail until the new year ticks over. There's simply no point plugging it so early. People aren't going to be buying tickets now. They're going to be waiting till March, April, whatever. So I think we're going to see a big escalation of the promotion of that. So I'm not at all perturbed. So shooters in Tasmania went to the polls in early 24, which was about a year before it's actually scheduled to be held. Now, I'm going to pull up the results of that election because it does actually affect shooters on the Upper Isle. They're the results. Now, what you'll see there is that Liberal and Labor hold 14 and 10 seats. This is in the lower house. They do not hold government in neither side holds government in its own right. You'll see that there's 5 Greens, there's 3 Jackie Lambie Network MPs and 3 independents. So you've got quite a number of crossbenchers, which makes it difficult for either side to implement.
And especially the Jackie Lambie Network hasn't always been pro-gun either.
No.
Obviously the Greens, so you got 5 Greens. I can't believe they've got 5 Greens members, but they have. But so obviously if the Liberals there were to form any sort of working coalition, it's not going to be with the Greens. So that only leaves the 3 independents and the 3 Jackie Lambie Network members but they need at least, well, how many do they need to form government properly?
Well, 18, because that's half of half of 36.
So they need all the independents and one of the Jackie Lambie Network to come across.
Yeah. Now that's an issue for shooters because you might recall in the lead up to that election there was quite a fuss over antique collectors.
Yes.
That in fact what happened under the Firearms Act, there was no grandfathering or protection of antiques as there is in other states as an exemption from licensing laws. So the government at the time the police had exempted antiques from the application of the Firearms Act, that is to require licensing and registration of pre-1900s. So this became a real issue because the police yanked the exemption because they were saying that it wasn't lawful in the start, but of course it left a whole lot of people high and dry, and and it was not a pleasant time for collectors in Tasmania. So what happened, both sides then actually gave commitments to say that they would that actually fix it. In fact, I've just got the pull that up. I've got the a media release by the current police minister, Felix Ellis. Basically, it's quite clear that their side says, as did Labor, that they will actually look after antique firearm owners. So,
Right.
so it was quite clear what they were going to do. But of course, the problem is that the outcome of the election
Yes.
means that actually they're not going to be able to implement that. So it's not because they decided not to; it's simply because they can't.
Right. Have you heard what's the outcome? Are they getting a working coalition with anyone at the moment?
No, but what's happening is that the police, I imagine under some, well, I don't know if they're playing a straight bat on this or not at all, but what they have done, they've provided their own form of exemption
Right.
and if you're on the audio podcast, I just use those, quote marks up in the air, an exemption to relieve antique collectors from those licensing and registration requirements. So there's a workaround. It's probably not quite above board, but it's in light of the difficulties that they're having over there.
Yeah, and I did notice, Neil, that the Shooters Union on their website, if you recently on their Facebook page, they posted proposed Tasmanian new firearm application criteria, including medical checks, and I haven't read it completely. Have you, Neil?
Well, thank you for that, Dorothy Dixon, because that's exactly where I was going and why I was actually raising it. Because you're right, what has happened is that the Tasmania Police, and we're now looking at a page from their website, which is at fas.police.tas.gov.au.
Right.
And basically they have got a new proposed, or a proposed changes to the application, the firearms application form, open for consultation until the 21st of November.
So what's the big catches for us in that one?
Okay, we're going to go through it right now. So it's effectively, if you are a shooter in Tasmania, or even if you're not, you got an opportunity to at least provide some feedback to the Tasmania Police, and there's the email address is on the screen, and it's firearms.services@police.tas.gov.au. And I think what this also what I don't what there are two things I don't like about this. The first is some of the changes, and the second is the fact that this is not being done by the police minister. This is being done by the police, the regulator, and you should never have the regulator in charge of the the things that they actually manage, because obviously it's a great way to build an empire. So what I've done, I've put the new form, the proposed form up on the screen if you're watching on the video version. Now this application form is 11 pages. To get a driver's license in Tasmania, the application form's 2 pages.
Right.
Okay. Now, so I'm going to scroll through it. Now, it's not actually marked up, so the changes won't be immediately obvious, but you can, it starts off with the usual stuff, your details. It then goes into, I'm not sure why, but your next of kin.
Yeah, next of kin. I've never filled out a next of kin for a firearms application before.
The only thing I can think of is if you get knocked over and you've still got a firearms license in your name, or guns in your name. I mean, the police will want to know where your guns are. What gets done with them may be a separate question, but they want to make sure that it's not being picked up by the real estate agent. So anyway, so there's other details which you're asking about whether you've lived in another state or territory.
Right.
Who cares? There's information about what categories and genuine reason you want.
Right.
Which okay. There's other information which we start to get into the territory of whether or not the police should already have this information on their database. So why the heck are they asking you to tell them whether you've had, for example, question 17, have you ever had a firearm license or permit cancelled?
They should know that because they're the police, the firearms departments in each state would already know that.
They should be already sharing that information. If they don't, that speaks volumes about the quality of the data sharing. So why would you want to build a national firearms database if basically the pieces you're trying to fit together don't fit? Anyway, so the questions just from the top to bottom. Have you ever held or applied for a firearms license in any other jurisdiction? Again, I don't really understand why that's even important unless they're looking for a way to wave you through. Have you been refused license or permit? Have you ever had a license permit cancelled? Then we are talking about other questions in this in item 18. Have you been charged with an offence? Now, an offence, as we were alluding to before, can be more than just a criminal offence. It could be a civil offence. Charged with an offence. It could be, what about speeding? What about parking? That's an offence. They're offences. Been found guilty or pled guilty, had been sentenced for a term of imprisonment or probation. Again, I would have thought that police databases would have this information. Had restraining orders, been protected from a person who's had a restraining order, been subject to a firearm prohibition order. This is bread and butter stuff for cops.
Yeah.
It's
just have a look at number F, Neil. Being subject to a firearm prohibition order in Australia or any other equivalent in any other country. Now, we get migrants from all over the world. There are certain countries, certain South American countries, which the whole population has a firearms prohibition order, that you can't own a firearm in some of those. So they literally, you have to, if you're coming from immigrant from those countries, you're going to have to answer yes to that question.
So if you're Japanese, for example,
okay. Well, there are some South American countries you can't own firearms.
Okay. Now, here's where we get right into WA territory. Okay. There's a section on mental and physical health. Okay, so there's
which is new. Yeah. I'm both in Queensland and in Victoria. As far as I know, don't have that section.
Whether or not it's new, the question should even be there, and I'm going to suggest in quite a few cases, no. In maybe some cases, like have you ever been treated with a serious mental thing? Then okay, that might be relevant to someone's ability or competency to handle a firearm. But some of the stuff here I don't believe does. So let's go through that as well. Have you experienced or been diagnosed with or required treatment for a mental health condition, and it's not defined, a neurological condition, ADHD, learning disabilities, migraine.
Migraine. So if you've ever been treated for a migraine, that's half the population.
Tourette syndrome. Now, there's some jokes I could probably put in there, but I don't think I will. An intellectual disability, a physical disability.
So that's interesting, because you've got disabled shooters who are literally part of the Commonwealth and Olympic Games shooting teams.
Yeah. Yep. A sensory disability, which includes sight or hearing impairment. I've got impairment. I'm wearing glasses.
Yeah. Well,
I can't.
Both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Alcohol or drug-related problems. Well, again, there's no definition around that. Any other physical or mental condition that may impede your ability to exercise reasonable and responsible control over firearm. That question's fine, because it relates to firearms, that you can understand. Yep. A bit like driving a car again. If you have a condition that prevents you from having reasonable exercise of control over a car, then okay, you shouldn't be driving. I get that. Have you ever attempted suicide or self-harm? Attended an appointment with a psychologist or psychiatrist, which I think is quite broad, ever been subject to a mental health plan? So look, I can see that some of these may border on that territory that we might actually say, you know what, don't have so much of a problem with some of these, but there's some other stuff there that I just don't think needs to be there. And I think that's what shooters need to provide feedback on to the email address I said before, by the 21st of November. Because some of this is, as I said, just touching on what is not as bad as WA, by no means, but it's leaning in that direction.
Yep.
And then we go, the rest of it's just identification and genuine reasons, such as providing those details. Interestingly enough, they also want to know, for recreational hunting or vermin control, on what land will you be shooting the specified animal?
They actually want the property addresses, the property owner, the phone numbers, the size.
Yep, they're getting intel on that.
That's straight out of WA.
That's getting out into that property letters territory. Yep. Maybe not without the letters, but it is that tightening of that noose just a little bit. because once the regulator gets their teeth into that, they're not going to let go.
No. You'd be stuck. You apply for a license, you'll be stuck for only using the firearm on that property.
Yeah. And the rest of it then goes on about employment, use of firearms, having a firearms collection, being a member of society, all that sort of stuff. We used to wear firearms in the declaration. So that's what's happening in Tasmania at the moment.
So yeah, so they've obviously, I'm not sure what there was previously, but obviously a lot less than that.
Yeah, look, as I said, I don't have the intel either. I mean, it's probably not that difficult to look up what the current form is, but the question is whether this stuff needs to be there, and why is it that people like you and me and Shooters Union getting involved, and now SSAA getting involved in politics? It's because of this stuff.
Yeah, because you start adding criteria like that, and you basically, I mean, and look, it includes migraines. I mean, everyone, half the population's had migraines. What, you tick yes on that, and all of a sudden you can't have a firearms license?
Well, they've either had migraines or what we perceive as migraines, because there is some technical difference.
Yeah.
I get that, but from a common understanding, a really bad headache, migraine, I think that's sufficient. So again, if you are in Tasmania, even if you're not, make a submission to firearms.services@police.tas.gov.au.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it for this episode today. So thank you, Sean, for your time. Really appreciate you coming in.
It's been good to catch up, Neil, and we'll see you soon on the next one.
Yeah, look, and I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch them next time. We'll see you later.